What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some first impressions for Nioh 3, a game I have been looking forward to basically since it was announced, as I really enjoyed Nioh 1 and 2. And with Nioh 3 making some big changes, I want to go ahead and start this video by saying that I have loved what I've seen so far. But what have I seen so far? So, if you're unaware, Nioh 3 dropped a demo over on Steam a couple days ago, actually, that is basically like the full first portion of the game, which is going to let you get familiar with some of the mechanics, yes, but also shows you some of the bigger changes coming with Nioh 3, such as their move to a sort of open world hub system. Not entirely dissimilar from what we saw Team Ninja do with, say, Rise of the Ronin, but obviously much more refined here, which does lead me to believe that was probably definitely a test of some sort. Either way, though, all of your progress from the demo, which can be completed up to a certain point, will transfer over to the full game, as tends to be the case with these sort of early demos, which is probably for the best because it seems to be a fairly large demo as demos go. That said, again, first impressions wise, I'm really enjoying what I'm seeing thus far, but some of the larger changes outside of just that sort of open world hub structure also includes other mechanics, like here we have a samurai and ninja style that you'll sort of freely swap between, each of which gets access to a different variety of weapons to use, or weapons that they can actually equip might be a way to say it. But they also obviously function a bit differently. For starters, ninja style is just straight up faster. You'll switch to that if you want to, of course, move faster in combat, yes, but they also get other benefits like extra damage when attacking an enemy's back. Rather than key pulsing, which is like a stamina recovery mechanic, they get the ability to drop a sort of clone for a second, which can distract enemies when they do the same. And then, of course, they also get their ninjutsu moves that you can learn by gathering up skill points and spending them on the appropriate tree for the ninja abilities. This will be things like caltrops, shurikens, all the usual stuff. Samurai, on the other hand, is a little bit different in the sense that as you attack and play with the samurai style on, you'll build up a meter which will then empower your martial arts abilities, which are the samurai abilities. This can lead you into like really strong combos and the like to hopefully put enemies into a stunned state. So just straight away, some of the base combat has changed from the originals while also keeping what's really familiar. In fact, they have the magic abilities this time tied to soul cores, which is a mechanic from the previous game, but here you'll take those soul cores you put up, throw them into a box at a shrine, which will either give you magical abilities that you can cast as consumable items per shrine rest, or you can put them into a different slot which will just give you the stats from them. So they kind of roped the magical abilities into that soul core mechanic, which I thought was an interesting way of handling that. And speaking of interesting handling of mechanics, one of the things that this demo has me the most curious about is how exactly they are going to adapt some of the stuff from the previous Nioh games into this one in terms of like in-game. So Nioh 1 and 2 are, I would say, pretty well known for having a very extensive New Game Plus cycle, and I'm curious if they'll keep that approach with this open world hub structure especially. But that is perhaps getting a little far ahead of ourselves. So let's talk about a couple of other things. On the technical side, I will say that as far as this demo goes, it was running well for me, but obviously it's too early to say if there's going to be extensive problems both for me as well as everybody else. And then there's character creation. One of the really cool things about Nioh 2 is that it has a surprisingly extensive character creator, and Nioh 3 is exactly the same in that sense. While I'm not huge on the cosmetic portion of character creation myself, it is fairly extensive in what you can actually make with it. I would be surprised if too many people are upset with the sheer amount of options here, other than having to play human, I suppose, but that would be a little bit of a different genre if not. But again, happy to see that the impressive character creator of Nioh 2 was back, and honestly a couple other Team Ninja games as well. That's something that as a studio they seem to be nailing. Now, story-wise, we play a character that was set to become the new Shogun, and it looks like this particular game is going to be set in the Edo period of Japan, but it's looking like it's also going to hop around time periods and stuff, so I'm not too sure on the exact story just yet, as tends to be the case with Nioh games. The story's never been its strong suit, if I'm I'm being honest. But the gist of it is you get betrayed as you're going to become Shogun with yet another soul, tracking down Amrita stones and using their power to basically pull in yokai and cause all sorts of destruction, and we're going to put a stop to that naturally, which is about as much story as you need for a game like this. So let's keep it moving. A standard progression for Nioh for the most part, it seems like, outside of the style changes and stuff, but the core, how you level up, all that stuff is still the same. Gather experience or Amrita from defeating enemies, spend that at shrines to level up. You'll level up your various stats, which scales with certain weapons, the usual Souls-like type fare. But where it gets interesting then is, of course, the armor and weapons and everything, as Nioh takes a more Diablo-esque loot system that I always like to refer to it as, which is to say randomized loot, some of which has set bonuses in the in-game of previous games anyway. You would, of course, try to assemble specific sets and specific stat bonuses, things like that, whereas here in the beginning it's just kind of a cavalcade of loot and you use the best you can. But all the loot you are not using, you can chuck into a shrine for extra Amrita to hopefully level up faster. So far, so normal, but where it gets crazy is all of the other systems, especially combined with this new sort of hub system structure they've got going on, where there's going to be all sorts of activities in that sort of semi-open world to do, and some of that is going to lend progression and power to your character, not in a dissimilar way from other games, to be sure, but for instance, you'll have these crucible areas where you can kill some yokai. This will power up your guardian spirit. Your guardian spirits are, of course, back. That's pretty central to the franchise. You'll encounter all these spirits that you can then equip and gain bonuses from having them equipped, which also then feeds into your living artifact, sort of ultimate ability when you power it up based on the guardian spirit you have with you. There's all the magic and the ninjutsu and the skills and stuff I've already mentioned. So suffice to say, as usual, there is a lot of progression here, and that is exactly what I wanted to see, because all of that, of course, bleeds into the combat itself. The combat, as you would expect with basically any Nioh game, if you've played them, feels fantastic. In fact, it's incredibly smooth here. And then combined with all the variety from both the regular build stuff, but also this new approach to the style system, which sees you swapping out styles, and in fact, where Nioh 2 would see you doing things like burst countering, here when enemies do a burst attack, which is a big red, like unblockable attack, instead of burst countering it, you hit a sort of style switch where you can stop that attack while also switching into a different style, which then, can potentially be of use to you as you swap freely in between them to get their individual benefits. And that's just a really cool approach to these things. And on top of that, we also have the return of the range stuff, which was always a given, but ranged attacks are really strong if you can get headshots, which is a great way to do things like clear the enemy camps out in the world, as an example. But stealth is also a fairly good option for you, getting behind an enemy or running them out of stamina. Essentially open them up to an assassinate attack, which won't necessarily always kill them if they're especially strong, but deals a lot of damage in a single hit and will often kill things in one. And so while, not exactly the focus of a game like this, stealth is a viable option in some situations. Now on the open world side of that, speaking of enemy bases, I would say if you played Rise of the Ronin, you likely get the big gist of what they're going for there. The larger map or hub is divided up into smaller areas, and completing activities in those smaller areas unlocks an exploration level. The higher you get that exploration level, the more the little individual map will show you, up to the maximum, at which point it just shows you everything there is to collect or do there, which includes things like those crucibles I mentioned, finding all the shrines, side quests, loot to be found, like interacting with friendly yokai, or looting, for instance, learnable skills. Some skills, rather than being unlocked via the ninja or samurai tree, will actually instead just be found out in the world, and then you bring them back to a shrine. And then these are abilities that also aid in progression, because you'll have a set amount of them that you can equip at once, essentially based on how many of these books you found, or the specific upgrade books that increase your capacity there. So long story short, just a ton of progression, a ton to do, and I would say at worst the hub areas might feel a little checklisty at the end of the day. But so far the exploration has been on point. The addition of like a double jump as an example to help you out with some of that as well has been fun. But long story short, This is a cool demo. I am actually more excited for Nioh 3 than I already was, and I was pretty pumped for it to begin with, but this demo kind of solidified it for me. Nioh specifically has always been, I think, the best combat that Team Ninja does, and they already do a lot of games with pretty great combat. So in the early hours here, I like what they're doing. I hope it stays that way across the entirety of the game. The game itself is releasing in full here in a handful of days on February 5th, a little under a week, I believe. And truth be told, I have no idea how long it'll take to get a full review out for this. I obviously don't have a review key as of yet, though it would not be unheard of for me to get one as late as just straight up release day, so hard to really say until then. But the actual review itself will almost certainly be after release, which just is what it is sometimes. However, I personally am really looking forward to playing this, and then, of course, sharing that experience with all of you. But for today, that is pretty much going to do it. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you checked out the demo or any of Nioh 3 for yourself, I'd love to hear what you think about it, which naturally means to like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.